weekend, the first Karate Kid movie in 15 years has dropped in theaters. That means it's time to stop and rank all 6 Karate Kid movies, plus the series Cobra Kai, from the worst to the best. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comments section. Let me know your ranking of the Karate Kid movies plus Cobra Kai as a whole if you've seen it. My list is not the right list, it's just my list, and I would love to see yours. Also, if you enjoy Karate Kid, Cobra Kai, I've done a bunch of content in the past. You can check that in this playlist somewhere around here when the video's over with. And let's get started. In last, the next Karate Kid. Now, this is widely regarded as the worst Karate Kid movie, the one that everyone kind of ignores and pretends like it doesn't exist, and it is last on this list. With all that said, I think it has more to offer than most people give it credit for, while still also having many very, very big and obvious flaws. On the positive side, I think the actual setup about Julie and Mr. Miyagi is a good setup for something new and different to do with the franchise. This is an example where a gender swap actually does bring something new to the table if you keep Mr. Miyagi. If you have the same mentor, it's very different trying to guide and be a father figure to a teenage girl as opposed to a teenage boy. Those are very different dynamics. And so that is something that can bring something interesting and fresh to the table. The context where he's helping out a family friend that goes back to World War II, that her parents died in a car accident. All of that is kind of fresh and interesting. And they cast Hilary Swank, who went on to win 2 Oscars. So, she obviously is a very good actress. She committed to the physicality, even in stuff where she's doing these knife kicks and stuff like that, and jump kicks. And so there's a lot there that works. Her with Pat, there's the chemistry and the dynamic to it. Is the actual execution of this in whole, does it really work? No, not really. Did they know where to go with it? Outside of okay, we've got a good, new, interesting dynamic for Mr. Miyagi to mentor someone. But what's the actual plot of the movie? Not the character arc for our character, not that. That works. But the plot, the central conflict that we have to overcome. And so they come up with the idea that there's a military teenage police at a high school led by a psychopath who is in front of the school in public punching underage boys in the face. I mean, the 90s were wild. I was there. I was in high school in the 90s. They were pretty wild. If a grown man in public walked up and was punching students and was a teacher, someone would file some complaints about this. And it's the sort of thing that you're trying to find something that's interesting, new, and different. And they came up with something that's just very silly. So much so that we get to the end of it and this teacher blows up a car and wants his kids to just assault someone. And it just takes it to a very silly place without having anything that feels anchored. And the final fight isn't really completing any arc or journey for Julie. And so there's a lot in there that does work, but the story itself is not one of those things. Couple fun facts. Walton Goggins, this was one of his very first movies, and it was directed by Dean Cain's dad. That's something I learned only very recently. Number 6, Karate Kid Legends. And I went back and forth whether I wanted Legends or Next to be in last place. I have nostalgia for Next Karate Kid. I did see it in the theater. I have been watching it for over 30 years now. I think that Next Karate Kid has a lot more heart to it and understands the franchise better than Karate Kid Legends. But in terms of which one is a lot more watchable, more entertaining, more fun, which one just kind of if you just take it on its own terms, which one works better? Karate Kid Legends, I think, is the more watchable film that does kind of work. But I think it's a pretty terrible Karate Kid movie. And what I mean by that is that it's a film that just completely misses what this franchise has always been about, which is these mentor figures stepping into the life of teenagers that need a father figure, and a father figure that needs a child. And there's a deep emotional connection in that. And that is essentially absent from this movie. There are teenager adult dynamics in it, but nothing that has any sort of emotional weight to it. The original is a drama. It's a coming of age story with a little bit of martial arts. And this is just an action movie with comedy and a pinch of mentoring in it. It is so dedicated to flying through its plot points. This is 94 minutes long. It's by far the shortest of these movies. It's flying through its plot points so fast that it never has any room to breathe or have any meaningful character moments. It feels like they added Ralph Macchio, Daniel LaRusso, into it with like a weekend rewrite. There's no plot reason for him to be in the film. There's barely much of any reason for Jackie Chan to be in the film, for that matter. And it's fun to see them, but there's no weight or significance to their presence. And that's what I mean where there's no heart, and it doesn't feel like it understands the franchise. It checks some boxes for, like, kid gets a black eye, kid moves to a new place, romantic interest, the old boyfriend's jealous. Like, it checks those boxes, but at the core of what Karate Kid is all about, I think this movie completely missed it. It's superficially entertaining. I guess there's some merit in the fact that it tries some new stuff, though it tries very weird stuff, and the execution is very goofy. But I just don't really think this is a good Karate Kid movie at all. In fifth, Karate Kid Part 3. And this is like just a pulpy rehash of the original film, where you could tell that they were running out of creative juices, that the movies were making too much money, so you got to make another one. But do you actually have another story to tell with our two lead characters? And it doesn't feel like they did for this movie. And so we're just going back and finding a way to remix what worked in the original film. So Cobra Kai increases back. We're doing All Valley again. And Mr. Miyagi's hesitant to train him, and eventually he's convinced to do it. Hitting a lot of the same beats, but it is this pulpy version of it that cranks up the melodrama to such a high level that it's kind of, maybe at times so bad it's good, but it is very entertaining. Terry Silver in particular is just played so over the top. It's tough not to be like fixated with the character, and it's the writing too. It's not like this is a subtle character played over the top. On the page, he's this super rich, evil businessman that's literally in the bathtub smoking cigars with an old lady. I'm like rewatching it with my kids this past week, and they're like, he's just taking a bath with an old lady taking oaths. It's like, that's Terrence Silver. And he's on the phone like, yeah, just dump the toxic waste in Borneo. Nobody in Borneo knows what toxic sludge is. It's so bonkers that, like, what he's saying, what was written, is crazy as can be and devoid of any subtlety or nuance. And so the performance also is devoid of any nuance or subtlety. He's just an evil businessman that, like, John Kreese saved me in Vietnam, so I'm going to do whatever it is. You need me to harass a teenager over a karate tournament? I'm going to do that. I will buy 20 dojos. What? Like, it's crazy as could be, but because it so commits, it just goes all in, and it plays it straight. Like, it has the same serious tone as the original movie, while becoming cartoonishly over the top. There's something very endearing about that. Something that would only come out of the 80s. Terry Silver is truly a product of the 80s, and then in Cobra Kai they had fun with that and made it canon that he was, in fact, hopped up on the cocaine. I do cocaine! But like, I can't say that this is a good movie. And even on the rating it as a Karate Kid film, it didn't find anything new to do with Daniel. Anything new in fact, Daniel's more annoying than ever. Like, it does kind of tap into that 80s charm. And maybe that's nostalgia, maybe that's I grew up with it, but it does have that spark to it in a certain sense.
You stay focused.
The fun fact on this one, the love interest that's a non-love interest is Robin Lively, Blake Lively's sister. Next up, The Karate Kid Part 2. Now, I know if you're my age and grew up on the Karate Kid movies, you're probably like, what? Why on earth is it not second on this list? I understand. Hear me out where we're going with all of this. When it comes to Karate Kid Part 2, like, it's the movie that it most closely matches the tone of the original film, and kind of, diving into the real character work with Daniel, Mr. Miyagi, their relationship. This film is very much Mr. Miyagi's film, where we're going back to his village. He's the one with the conflict with the bullies, the deep conflict with the bullies that trickles down to Daniel. He's the one with the has his more meaningful romance in it that kind of has a history to it. We learn more about him, and so they kind of take the story, which they go from Daniel's story, and this time it's going to be a little bit more Mr. Miyagi's story. Just going to Okinawa gives it like something fresh and new. There's it builds out like very much we're going around the world, so you build out the world of Karate Kid, that it feels like it is this bigger thing that really does cross countries and time, of this journey that Mr. Miyagi has been on and the influence that he's had in the world. And it's filled with, of course, iconic little bits in it with, of course, the final fight with Chosen, and one that fights it's actually to the death, the breaking of the ice, the glory of love. There's a bunch of things in here that are like quintessential Karate Kid, best of the 80s type stuff. I just don't think the movie as a whole has nearly the same impact as the original film, because the most potent thing that you can do with these two characters is have a son in need of a father discover that person, and a father in need of a son discover that person, and build that relationship, and have Daniel find his courage and his confidence and fight back against bullies. Like, that's the best stuff you have, and they did the perfect version of it. And so you don't have really that next step for either one of them. The character with the arc in this film is Sato. There's kind of you have a redemptive arc for Sato, and you have a tragic arc for Chosen, where through the course of the movie, you think in storytelling, who's the character that changes and who's the character that needs these events to happen to become, either choose to be the better version of themselves or the worst version of themselves. Sato in the end becomes that best version of himself, but Chosen becomes the worst version of himself. But what that means is the characters, our protagonists aren't the ones that have the most compelling arc and journey. It's the guys over there. And even with the way that Sato's journey plays out, I think the change is too much on one moment. And it would have been nice if it was a little bit more of a journey, as opposed to one karate chop and we're best friends again. That's kind of where I come from on this one, of like, they're along for the ride with these other characters. There's iconic stuff. There's great stuff. Like, talking about like how much I love these movies. I've seen this movie a zillion times. Actually, I've probably seen Karate Kid 3 a little bit more because it's just more goofy and fun. But all of these, the original, actually all 4 of the original ones, I've watched an awful lot. In third, The Kung Fu Kid, or Karate Kid 2010, the remake. And I know for people that are purists of the original trilogy that, it's sacrilegious to have the remake above Part 2. To an extent, I get it. But it's also a pretty classic story. And it's a good, effective version of it. That they changed some of the ingredients around, so now he's moving off to China. And thus, should it be called The Kung Fu Kid? Yeah. but for branding, marketing reasons, we all know why they called it The Karate Kid, despite him learning Kung Fu. The movie repeatedly states that he's learning Kung Fu. It is what it is. You're going to sell a lot more tickets if it's called The Karate Kid as opposed to The Kung Fu Kid. And that's just a nitpick. It doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. When you dive into the heart of the story, it's about what I think Karate Kid's always been about, these father-son relationships and finding confidence and working hard and training and becoming that better version of yourself, and the lonely man that lost his family rediscovering what it means to connect with other people. All of those key ingredients for Karate Kid are in this movie, and they work. And also, as someone that my first movie webpage was a Jackie Chan fan page way back in the 1980s, like, I think Jackie Chan is like a great pick to bring in as this new version of Mr. Miyagi, as the quirky loner that has an off sense of humor and can do his own fights and stuff like that. He's a great pick. And so just a lot of things in here that I really enjoy about this movie. Now, does it in any way compare to the original? No, I mean, but that's why the original is one of many of our favorite films of all time. That I think certain things, like the simple fact that the bullies and the evil dojo, they're speaking Chinese, it creates a language barrier between the audience and our antagonists, and even between our character and the antagonist, that makes them just feel a lot more distant. I mean, they're also portrayed a little bit more one-dimensional as just psycho bullies, where even Johnny feels, in the original, feels like an actual guy that you would know from your school, that's cocky and a little bit full of himself, but like, he feels like a guy that has positive qualities, and you can see why someone would like him. Versus like the kids in this one, the evil bullies in this one, just feel like psychos. Like the evil kid looks insane, and the teacher's a nutty, crazy guy. And add a language barrier that just kind of makes it that much more distant, that just kind of comes off a little bit more one-dimensional. And there's a level of brutality and cruelty in it that's like, really? Middle schoolers are this violent? That seems like a bit much. It's probably 10, 15 minutes too long, that we didn't need to stretch this out to 2 hours and 20 minutes. And I also think this is an example of where sometimes, like, slickness in aiming for the broadest possible audience sometimes makes things less universal, because some of the little idiosyncratic, quirky, weird things of the original. But, you know, like I said, I think it hits all the right beats, it hits all the right notes, the emotional moments work. And so every time I watch it, I go, that's a good remake of Karate Kid. They're just learning Kung Fu. Our runner-up, Cobra Kai. I've told this story many times before, but when they first announced this show, I thought it sounded terrible. When it debuted, I tuned in kind of to hate watch it. Like, oh my goodness, what are they about to do to Karate Kid? This looks terrible. And I got to the end of the first episode, and I kind of looked over at my wife, and we're both like, was that good, or am I going crazy? And we're like, yeah, we're going to watch the next episode, right? And so we signed up for YouTube Red, where it originally debuted, and binged through the whole season, and was like, what just happened? Because that was awesome. Like, I went in cynical, skeptical, looking to trash this thing, and it was just so good. And the reason it was so good is that it really understood the heart of Karate Kid. It translated into a new genre, a new style, its own flavor, but at its core, it really understood what Karate Kid was all about and kind of flipped it all on its head, in which case Johnny becomes the most unlikely of Mr. Miyagi's, and Cobra Kai are now the underdogs. And it does this just really interesting, highly entertaining spin on the Karate Kid with this rivalry with Daniel and Johnny. And as it went along, I had my issues with some of the later seasons. I feel like it probably went a season and a half too long. And there's some things, the directions they went that I don't think that was a very good idea. But overall, they found a way to like just dive into the teenage melodrama, find interesting places to go with it, build the relationship between Johnny and Daniel so they become friends and work together and respect one another, and just do a whole bunch of different things that somehow they made it work. In particular, like bringing back Chosen and Terry Silver and making them these much more fleshed out, well-rounded characters, where Terry Silver goes from just this crazy one-dimensional guy into this very compelling villain and one of the best characters in the whole franchise.
If you continue down this path, nothing in your life will ever be the same again.
For me, my favorite character in the whole deal is Johnny. That I think that he is just so funny and so entertaining, and that they got away with how politically incorrect he was in the first 2 seasons is just fantastic. And by the end of it, like, it got some rocky in seasons 5 that it was plot points that just were bumpy, didn't make a lot of sense to me, stretched out a little bit too long. But by the end of it, I think they landed it in such a satisfying way that I just loved what they did with this show. But coming in at number 1, the original, The Karate Kid, one of my favorite movies of all time. And it's just a classic, timeless, universal story about the bullied kid who needs to find his confidence. But it's also about the kid without a father that finds a father figure. And it's about a father figure that doesn't have a kid and finds it. It's just these just absolutely universal stories that anybody can connect with. All kind of packaged with just the right amount of 80s flair to it to make it interesting, a little bit idiosyncratic, and being directed by literally the guy that directed Rocky. So you've got the guy that directed the best underdog story of all time, now directing the second best underdog story of all time. And like some people at the time kind of discredited The Karate Kid as just Rocky for high schoolers, and there are some similarities, but they're also wildly different. Like, it's a coming of age story. It's a high school romance. And it's such a story of mentorship. And like, because of that, it's a movie that, like, I can watch it with my 11-year-old daughter now, 41 years later, and she can connect with it and see the emotion in it and the heart in it. And it's interesting as you kind of get in the behind the scenes on it and the fight to get the movie made, and the executives wanted to cut the scene where Mr. Miyagi's drunk and crying about the death of his family.
You have a problem with that?
It's like, how clueless are these guys? That's literally the heart of the movie, of like the whole thing that kind of pulls it together. Like, who is this guy that has these skills, that is so caring and tender, but is so isolated? And it's the moment that kind of makes everything so clear and gives weight and significance to everything. And it's just like a great moment, a great revelation about a character that just makes it so powerful. And then, like just even all the iconic little details about it, whether the Cobra Kai motto, wax on, wax off, the crane kick, the soundtrack to it, all of these things became quintessential elements of the 1980s because it's just so well done and memorable and distinct. It's not reinventing the genre. It's just a great version of it, and the one that was done in a way that so many people across so many decades have connected with it on such a deep level. That's when you've done something special, that all these years later, we're still making movies and we're doing Cobra Kai, and children today are discovering it for the first time with their parents or through Cobra Kai and being like, that's a great movie. That's when you have one of the best films of all time, and that's why it, of course, is number 1. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out my other Cobra Kai Karate Kid content, wherever that playlist is right around here. Hey, thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies and TV too much.